I did something a little different this week, Binge Factor listeners. I went out and reached out into one of my alumni groups. I belong to the RISD, Rhode Island School of Design Alumni Group. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to serve my community. I want to serve my alumni. So how can I help them best? Well, there's got to be some RISD alums who have podcasts out there. And so I posted it into the LinkedIn group and said, hey, anyone out here have a podcast? I'm looking to interview you. Doesn't matter how big your show is, because I'm looking to feature you no matter what. But I'd love to hear from you. And I got a couple of really great suggestions, and some people pinged me. And one of the first ones that I'm bringing you is really fun. And it's such a different show than I would have gotten maybe otherwise. So thinking about how you're going to go about getting guests, follow my model. Go try your alumni groups. Highly underrated. You don't know how great a resource you might get there. And they come highly referred because someone who knows you is likely to refer them to you. So now you're going to get someone who's probably a right fit. Plus, at the same time, you're out there letting your own alumni know you got a show. So that's helpful for you as well. So I've got K-Pod. I love the name of the show, K-Pod. So much fun. So it is Juliana Sohn and Catherine Hong, and they are just dynamic. They're into really growing the Korean American community and really looking at how the creatives within that, because that's their niche and that's their edge. Because, remember I said I went to RISD. And so that's what they've got going on in their show. So Catherine is from Great Neck, New York, and Juliana is from New Jersey. And they met in high school in summer school program in New Hampshire and kept in touch by writing letters. Remember that when we used to write letters for a year or two before they kind of lost touch. And then close to 25 years later, they reconnected in New York City and learned that they were both working in magazines, Catherine as a writer and editor, and Juliana as a photographer. They've remained close ever since. And 3 years ago, they were asked to launch a podcast for the nonprofit Korean American Story. And Juliana knew just who she was going to have as her co-host, and she brought Catherine in. And because they have years of an experience interviewing and featuring artists, designers, makers, and entrepreneurs for some of the best loved publications and magazines, so it's a real treat to bring those skills and experience to podcasting and to something that's highly personal, the Korean American community. So they're brand new to podcasting when they started, but they've learned so much quickly and are enjoying the challenges of this new media type. But you know what they're also doing that I really want you to hear today is that they've got a sponsor from the beginning. So Korean American Story said, hey, we want a podcast and we don't want to host it. We want to have someone from our community host it. And they reached out and they found some hosts from their community. And now they're bringing that forward. So Juliana and Catherine have just really got this really interesting show put together. And their model of it shows such great skill in broadcasting and in writing and editing. And they're just really bringing those things together in a really interesting way. So the things that I normally highlight are extremely different in this episode. So you're going to want to listen. So take a listen to the hosts of K-Pod.
Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazzard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the Binge Factor.
Catherine and Juliana, welcome. So glad you're here and really excited to talk K-Pod.
Thank you for having us.
It's so good. It is such a good show. And normally I make everybody wait till the end to get to the bingeable factor, but I want to start here with you. So as we were talking beforehand, you guys are like, I don't think anyone's binging on our show. I guarantee you there are people binging on your show. I can tell the way that it's going. But what? You guys were listeners. You ladies were listeners of podcasts beforehand. Did you binge on podcasts?
So I'm a serial binger. I would say I was a little bit addicted to podcasts. I think I like the multitasking factor of audio. So I just listened to, I probably had about 10 podcasts I binge listened to like every day.
How about you, Catherine?
Same. It also coincided when I moved out of the city to the suburbs where I felt so isolated. So I listened to podcasts all day long, and so when the time came that Juliana and I started talking about doing this, of course, I had never done it, but I had certainly heard enough. I had heard so many. I knew what I liked, and I had an idea of what we could do.
So you had a model in mind. Well, it shows. And obviously you have a producer involved who you give a shout out to and who did that wonderful interview of the two of you, which is your episode 11, which I absolutely love because we really get some insights into you. And I'm so glad you did it because that would have been the first thing I would have said. You both need to do an intro episode so we get to know you both a little better. But that in and of itself, where you have this kind of tie into a model, it's coming through for you. So your binge factor, and that's what I want everyone to hear right now, because this is the reason for them to tune in and check out your show and understand what you're doing and what you're working on, is that you have this deep shared identity and shared experience with your audience. You are all Korean Americans. Those are who you interview. That's your personal background and experience. That's your experience of becoming friends together as well. And it's coming through the show because it brings this connection to your guests that elicits a level of openness. You're already starting at a place of connection so that your interviews go deeper and are more open and honest. And I mean, you invite it like a discussion rather than an interview. And that in and of itself is amazing binge factor that makes me want to listen again and again and again to hear what you elicit the next time.
So wonderful to hear.
I know. I love that. I do think that we thought there's so many guests that we have that, especially if they have something that they're promoting, they're going to get asked the same questions over and over again. And because our sponsor company is a nonprofit called Korean American Story, our aim is really to get that story out of them. Talk about their creative background, because that's not something that a lot of people in the Korean community, as immigrants were promoting. So these are stories that we found, we hope that would inspire people whose parents were telling them, doctor, lawyer, that there are other options out there.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the first things that I really want to touch on too. So you have this connection to Korean American Story, which is over a decade old. As an organization. Have you been involved for a long time, or is this sort of a new joining of this for you doing this podcast?
So I met HJ, who's one of the founders, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. And because I worked on a photo project and I got involved with him. And we actually did, we collaborated on something together, and we just kept in touch. There was like an instant synergy and, shared perspective. And, we participated in a lot of their events. And one day I was so excited about podcasts and I wanted to see more Asian American content out there that I emailed him and said, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? Because I thought they were the people who should put one out. And he got right back to me and said, yes, I've been dying to put out a podcast. I have this idea and I think you would be the perfect host.
Yeah, let me rope you into it, right?
So that's how it started. And so I had a trust and a bit of a history. We hadn't worked together that much, but I really love the organization. And then I thought, I don't want to do this alone. And that's how I brought Catherine into it.
Well, good choices. I love a co-host model. I do. It adds a dimension to it. It also can add complication to it, but you two have distinctly sounding voices. And I think that really, really works. And Catherine's nodding. I would love for you to add to that.
Well, I know in the past, I've heard some podcasts where the two hosts sound so similar. It's very confusing for the audience, and I don't think there's much they could do about it. Fortunately, Juliana has this beautiful, low, mellifluous. How am I saying it right? Has a beautiful. Juliana, I think, has a beautiful voice. It's definitely different timbre than mine, so there's no mistaking us. And also, we have a shared interest, and we have very similar questions. Yet, we have different sorts of types of questions that we're interested in, and a little bit different style. So it's easy for me to know maybe what she's going to follow up with. And I think she can guess sometimes what I'm going to ask or when I'm going to ask it. And that's only gotten smoother, I think, as we've gone further into doing the podcast.
That is always an issue with co-hosts, right? Do you have signals between the two of you, or do you have like trading off of questions? Are you going to plan it that way? But yours seems truly like it's a discussion amongst the three of you, you and your guest, and it seems very fluid. Is that accidental? Is it purposeful?
We do a lot of research. I think when we were doing these podcasts in person, it was a lot easier to connect with our guests and just ask enthusiastic questions. But then, being on Zoom, I found it to be a little bit harder to kind of keep the conversation sort of going, to like spilling over like in depth. And I also think that there was an opportunity. There was an interview. It was with Margaret Cho, and I had started reading her book, and I was in the middle of it when we had our interview. So I didn't get a chance to finish it. And then after we did our interview, I finished reading the book, and there were so many things I learned from the book, and so many questions that I thought in hindsight sounded really dumb or disrespectful, because clearly she'd already put this information out there. So I think after that experience, I made sure to do a really deep dive. And now, Catherine and I have a pre-pro meeting where we script out a lot of the questions. We list everything. We kind of have like a script, an arc of where we'd like the conversation to go, and we pace it out. And it doesn't always go that way, because with live conversations, you want there to be surprises. You want it to like go in the weeds, really.
Well, so I don't recommend that to my clients and to the listeners out there, to script out your questions, but yours does not sound like that.
The word, no, I don't think she meant script, like actual script, but we map it out.
That's what I was going to say. I believe that you're like bullet pointing, you want to touch on this topic and that topic. Yeah. You're not scripting them out, because if you did, you wouldn't be as fluid as you are. And you really are very fluid in basically who asked it, asking it in a way that follows up what was previously said. So you do it very well.
Thank you.
I feel like we're getting a crit. This is great. I love hearing
That's right. Now you know my secret, my RISD secret, that we're doing it. We're really doing a critique of your podcast. And so actually, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because we started doing a clubhouse where we actually do a concerted critique of mostly people who are early and starting out in their podcast. And we do it. And I wanted to call it Podcast Crit. And Tom's like, no one's going to know what that means. But Juliana, you would. So I love that. That's so funny. Well, I want to jump into a few things that are related to the 5 things. So let's do our 5 things really now, the 5 things that are helping to make your show successful, or the 5 things you're probably working on to make it successful. And I know you've got a little bit of team supporting you through Korean American Story, but feel free to add what they do for you instead of just what you're doing yourself. And so we'll do that really quickly here. So what are the ways in which you are getting those great guests that you're getting on your show?
Juliana and I are constantly texting each other with ideas. We see people in the news, people with projects. So we come up with a list of people. And we both have backgrounds in, I was an editor for many years. So a big part of my job was booking celebrities and guests for feature stories. So it's pretty familiar to both of us in terms of how to contact an agent, a publicist, follow, and it takes actually quite a bit of time crafting the emails, making sure they get to the right person, following up, being persistent, and trying to be persuasive, because we are such a small little organization. It's not like I'm trying to book them to be in W Magazine. So we really need to try to appeal to that sense of community. This is a nonprofit. This is something special. This is not typical media. This is a passion project, and it's something for Korean Americans.
But I suspect there might be an Oscar winner in your future of an interview. That's not going to be easy because she's going to be a little busy. So Yoon Jung has just been she's the first Korean American to win an Oscar, and let alone a woman. So that's just really fantastic on top of that. So I'm sure you're going to have to work hard to get her to make time for you, but I hope she'll come on.
Well, I think the fact that we are a part of Korean American Story, who's been around for a decade, and they have done programming with some of these really talented Korean Americans, and so they do have deep connections within the community that really help.
So you're tapping into great intros. That's helping, right? That connection point for yourself. Wonderful. Well, the biggest and the hardest place that this question that I'm asking you next is increasing listeners. And it's the one that no matter what level of podcast you're at, this is the one everyone's always working on. But what do you do between the two of you and how you share your show? How do you increase the listenership?
So I think everybody knows that social media is, it has the widest reach for our budget, and we're not as maybe we don't post as much as we know would be effective. One of the things that we have employed, we hosted a few giveaways that tag somebody, follow this person, tag a friend, and then that seems to generate a lot of interest because it's fun. There's a tie-in with the guest. It's promotion, but it's interactive. So that's one way we've done it.
Wonderful. And, you have a producer that you're working with because he's wonderful. So HJ, as you mentioned, is your connection to that. How do you both, besides the research, make sure that it's a production, it meets the production quality you expected from the shows that you listen to? How did you make it match that?
Well, do you think it does match that? What do you think?
I think it has a highly produced, feel like some of the NPR shows and other things like that. I definitely feel you have that entertainment feel to it. So yeah, I do think you're headed in that world, and you must have thought that through and specifically chosen the way that you do it.
Well, we've kept it very simple. We were new, so very, very simple format. Just me and originally it was in person, so it would just be myself, Juliana, and one producer with the equipment traveling to someone's home or studio. I think one of the, and they did buy some good microphones, some good equipment, portable equipment.
Yeah.
Excellent microphones. But I think our secret weapon is our editor, who's amazing, AJ Valente. He
our audio engineer.
Everything. Our audio engineer, AJ Valente, has been fantastic. He edits it beautifully. He lets us make all kinds of little comments and suggestions, and he helps take out our fumbles. I think he's one of the main secrets to our success.
Oh,
well, good. So you got an editor involved. But you know what? I think that with the type of people you're having on your show, that level of professionalism is important to attracting even better guests in the future. So it's serving you well, and I think it will continue to serve you well to set that tone for yourself. And it's okay. Keep it simple at the beginning and grow. Right? You can always change and get a little more complex later if you choose. But I don't think it's necessary. I think you've got a really nice formula going on with the production of your show.
So one of the things that I'd like to clarify is that HJ is founder of Korean American Story, and he's been so involved and supportive of K-Pod. But to HJ's credit, one of the ways he's most supportive is that he believes in us, and he is so entirely hands off. Catherine and I produce K-Pod ourselves, so we do all the production. We have Jessica Park, who is she does some production help for us, and she's really, really helpful. But our crew is really, Catherine and I do all the strategy. We come up with the guests. Catherine does all the episode notes. I did all the visuals. We do everything. And then AJ is the miracle audio engineer. And he does a rough cut, and then we go in and we just like really work everything. So
wait, I'm going to stop you right there because I want the listeners to really hear that. What Juliana just said right there is that they go back into their show. This is actually the key to great production, is that they're staying involved in making the choices. You can have an amazing audio editor. And as you said, AJ is amazing for you. But the issue is that they're not you. They don't make the choices that you would make from an editorial standpoint. And so I'm sure, Catherine, your background in editing understands how important that stage of doing that final editing pass and making some choices are to the process of producing a really good show. So you actually are being very heavy in your production value by doing that. And most people don't. So I credit to you too for spending the time to do that.
I'm fascinated that you said that because, of course, Juliana and I have never done this before. So we assume this is how everybody works.
I know.
And you're absolutely right, because as an editor and a writer, that's what I do. I just go over and over things with a fine tooth comb, and I'm a fiddler, and I like to make something precise. And so that's where I spend a lot of time. And I thought everyone did that, but yeah.
I'm going to tell you they don't. They really don't.
So it's great that he can indulge us, because I'm sure we're very annoying. We always have more and more things to tweak. I figure why not? Know what?
It's good that you're doing that. You're keeping control over that production value, and it's going to serve you well in the long run. So this is who you are, and this is what your show is about, and that quality level matters. So I want to go on to the next thing that we do. So encouraging engagement is the next thing that I ask questions about. And you kind of mentioned using the gamification, the sort of contests and other things, but are you engaging with your audience? And if so, where?
People instant message us on our Instagram, which is KPodPod. And we get a lot of comments and suggestions and questions from listeners through direct message. And it's great to just hear what people have to say, or the fact that they're even listening.
That's fantastic that because as we record this, you're 23 episodes in. That's actually really early to be getting connection points. So the fact that you're getting direct messages says to me that you, as I thought it, you are actually being binge listened to, and you are onto something. So that is really good that you're doing that. I love that you're getting direct messages, because that is easier to engage with.
Yeah. I think we are guilty of not quite having found our footing with our Instagram feed. We just decided that we're going to switch it up, because there were so many people that we were really excited about that we wanted to have on as guests that we either couldn't get, or they weren't quite right for K-pop, but we were enthusiastic about and we wanted to support. So we were using our Instagram feed to really highlight all these people we were excited about, and maybe losing a little bit of the identity of what K-Pod is. So we decided to rein it in a little bit and focus more on our episodes and on our actual guests. So because of that, I think we're spending a little bit more time on it. Because when you're not really sure what the direction is, it's really hard to engage. So there's been more engagement with some of our followers on K-Pod recently.
As you've honed it in better. I love that. This I think is the hardest part about social media. We have I just recently had on Whitney Lortzen, who consults with us as a strategist, and Instagram is one of her strengths. And she said the same thing as as she wanted to use and apply all the stuff she'd been doing on Instagram, but it didn't actually work for the podcast in the way that she thought it would, and had to, change up her own strategy. So I think you're always finding that. So don't worry, ladies, you're in the same place almost all of us are. Keep tweaking it. You'll get there. So, and I think then they'll change something up before we settle into something, and we'll have to adapt again.
Yeah,
so that's
definitely.
That's the social media curse and model. So anyway, well, the last thing that I usually ask about is monetization of your show. And in your case, you're partnered up with a sponsor of it. So are they providing production support, sponsorship, funds for that? And is that in that way, though, is it also, though, translating into helping you, with your photography business, with your freelance writing? Are you getting more gigs and opportunities to do things? So is that coming through all the way?
Well, Create American Story pays for all the production costs, so that all the hours that our audio engineer logs in, they handle that. And what other costs? I mean, there are not very many costs. Juliana and I do it for
you're not getting
basically
paid.
Nothing. We do it for a very nominal fee, which we still appreciate. But yes, we consider it almost like volunteer work. Something that we love, like a passion project.
But because we get a nominal salary, we have the freedom and the luxury of saying no to any guests that they suggest, and we really get to shape the podcast in the vision that Catherine and I have. And
that's a risk, right? When you have a sponsor that they could be too controlling. So that's really great that you still have creative control. And I think it's serving them well, actually. So it's a good choice on their part.
And, it's interesting because I think at the start, I felt that we were really bringing our credentials to the podcast and really fueling that engine. And our editorial background in magazines definitely, translated into skills that helped the production. And now I feel that, podcasting is kind of everywhere. And now I feel like I've gained skills, and it's really enriched me and my experience. And so now it feels a lot more reciprocal.
Yeah. Are you getting, more business? Are you getting asked to do things? Are you getting freelance jobs? Are you getting things that are sort of supplement because you have a podcast?
I think Catherine has.
I think both of us have. Well, for sure. What I like about it is because it's our thing, it's guests that we love. It shows our sensibility. So then I can post about certain episodes on my personal Instagram. And then, editors that I work with see it, and they're reminded, first of all, that I exist. They are also reminded that I'm doing interesting work, or maybe, I know this person, I know that person. So it's been good in that way, I think. I mean, it's helped me kind of extend my network in a way, and reinforce my presence in some small way, So yeah,
continuing
I think
to be present and relevant is always a good thing, right?
Yeah. And the fact, I often lament the fact that, I've been a writer and editor at print magazines for most of my career. I still pretty much write for print magazines. Like, I haven't done that much that's different. This podcast has been one pretty major new skill that I've developed, and it's nice to have something new to do in my old age.
Not that old. You are not that old, Catherine.
It's nice to have, at least I've learned something new,
Yeah.
So I did recently get booked for a job, and one of the mood boards that they sent me had pictures of my podcast guests on it that I had taken, which was great.
What a great compliment to get you back to you.
Yeah. but I have to say that one of the things that Catherine and I have been engaging in behind the scenes is that we have been really pitching our guests hard to some of our magazine clients, trying to get more Asian faces, Asian talent into these publications that are traditionally much more white. And we haven't been that successful. And I have not been asked to photograph the Asian community, the Korean community, or I get work that's basically the same as before, and I'd like to see that change. I think Catherine and I
think that you're positioned well for that to change, and for you to be the catalyst to help make that happen. Because I mean, think about that. We just had this Oscar win. We've had Asian hate outlawed, in a sense by Congress. Hopefully that turns into something that's in action, but that brings a presence of requirement of looking at the diversity of who we're featuring, looking at how we're presenting that.
Absolutely.
And you're the voice of that right now. And so why wouldn't I turn to you both as as someone who can visualize that in photography and someone who can write about that and edit that, and truly be the voice of that. So I think that you have positioned yourself in just the right time, that maybe it's coming to a point that you're going to see that. Let's hope it tips, because I really believe that that is extremely important right now in this time and age for us to be shifting that viewpoint of Korean Americans, of Asian Americans in the world view.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to revisit some of those pitches that we sent out, over a year or so ago. And I think it will be more in people's forefront of their minds. And hopefully they'll be looking at these ideas with a different vantage point.
Definitely. Yeah. Are you both involved in how your podcast episodes are displayed in the Korean American Story .org website, in the blog there, because they're visually beautiful there?
Well, thank you. AJ, again, our all-talented audio engineer, is also a great web designer, and he designed that web page. And we tinkered and tweaked it and asked for certain, layouts, and so we had a little bit of a hand in the design work. So I don't know. Are you saying that you like the way it's laid out?
I do. I do. I mean, this is one of the most underserved portions of it. Like we as podcasters, we tend to forget about our website view of it, but it's actually one of the ways that we get new listeners all the time, where they find you through the website. They're going to find you via Google. They're going to find you and then go listen to the story. And when they're beautiful like that, it gives you a production value idea that if I'm comparing you to another show, just that in and of itself is going to make me choose you. But they're so engaging, the photographs that you've chosen and put into each episode as your featured image. That's what they technically call it in your blog, but the featured image, the square that's showing on your compilation page. And for all of you listeners out there, that you can go to thebingefactor.com and I'll link straight through to the exact page so that you'll be able to find what this looks like. And so it's technically what we call a blog roll page, but you have it and it's kind of like panels. And there's a featured image and a little blurb before it. And Catherine, I'm assuming you have something to do with the description where what phrases are being used there, because they're highly edited and they're very well written to the point at which they entice me into wanting to listen to this podcast, wanting to listen to this particular episode. And it's so visually engaging and it's written really well. Both things draw me in. So you're touching all the senses there. And then once I listen, I'm going to subscribe. And so that's your entree to more listeners in the future.
Oh, this makes it feel so good, Tracy.
Well, good. But this is the thing. So many people discount this side of it. And because of your backgrounds, you didn't, and you stayed involved with how that looks and represented. And it's a good thing for Korean American Story because they have a nice website anyway. It's a beautiful website, but they want to make sure that it has the power and the value for their own organization, or what's the point in sponsoring it if they're not getting the value on their website at the end of the day? And that they truly are doing that here.
That's great. Well, that's the only thing we really knew how to do coming into this, the writing and the editing and the photography. So I'm happy that it was.
Well, and you're diversifying all around here. You're getting yourself so well-rounded. You're getting the audio, and you've added video. And, first off, I loved that there was a YouTube version that was what we call audiogram, right? Where it's a static image and the sound is going in the background, but you still put it on YouTube that way in the early episodes. And then I'm assuming about the pandemic point, that's when you switched to having actual video too.
Yes.
How did that feel for you? Did it feel uncomfortable? Did you enjoy it?
We kind of freaked out when there was a suggestion that we would record it. And we're like, oh no, we just did season 1 and we got comfortable with audio. And now it's like a video game. It was like leveling up. Everyone's self-conscious about the way they look and whatnot, but I think we've gotten used to the fact that Zoom is Zoom and there's a Zoom aesthetic, and it's okay. It's all okay. The low quality, laptop camera and whatnot. And honestly, if you go on YouTube and you look at the people, it's just so much more engaging. And the last time we had a meeting about this, I said, if we end up going back to, recording our interviews in person, I'm going to suggest that we get a little camera, bring our laptops, do whatever it is. But I don't think we can go back to having the videograms and the static frame.
It's really hard to go back. You're right. Once you start video, but it is difficult in person. So this adds a layer of complexity, and feel grateful that you've gotten as far into your show and you kind of got the rest of it under the belt, and you didn't try to do it all at once. It would have frustrated you. Yeah. The thing about your show that I find so fascinating, right, is that you might think that each interview, because you're story-based show, which there are a lot of story-based shows out there, that it would start to feel formulaic and the same, but it's not. And I think there might be something about your personal viewpoints and curiosity of things. Tell me, when you're looking for a story in something and you aren't really sure if it's there, how do you elicit that when you ask questions?
It helps that there's 2 of us, definitely.
Catherine, what about you?
Catherine is much more arts and culture.
I think a lot of it goes back to the research. And I think when Juliana didn't quite get to finish the end of Margaret Cho's book, that was a total aberration, because Juliana does a hell of a lot of research, and that's something I'm used to doing. So we usually know the juicy stories of someone's life, but we know also that nobody, because they're not Korean American, nobody asked the in-depth version of that question, or the other side, more about the parents maybe, or something very specifically Korean. So and
I'm just going to stop you right there, Catherine, for a second, because I want to mention your latest episode, Michelle's Honor, that you hit on that in a really great way in that episode, where she's telling you about food. And I think at one point you talk about not wearing a bra and wearing a bra. And I was sitting there going like, this is something outside of my understanding. I'm not Korean American, obviously, but it's outside my understanding. But you got her to talk about that. And that's brilliant, because that's an insight into her that I don't think you would have gotten anywhere else.
Yes, people open up more. I think, we're not related, but all Koreans are sort of related, or there's just a couple of degrees of separation.
There's a shared experience. For sure.
Yeah. So often we'll meet someone, and then maybe during the interview, we'll realize, oh, I think you know my uncle, or, it's such a small community. So there is sort of that familiarity. And there are a few inside jokes, which I think makes everyone feel comfortable.
But I thought it was also really funny is that you were saying to her, wow, you're more Korean. Like it was like a challenge.
Yeah.
That's so
Well,
funny.
I do think we have been learning a lot about Koreanness and Korean identity as well. Because I don't think anyone would have chosen Catherine or me to host a podcast about Korean Americans, because we are not fluent in Korean. We're not, steeped in the history and, so in touch with our identity. We have a lot of insecurities. And, when's the last time you were in Korea? Like, we don't embody like this, like perfection or expertise, but we do. I think we probably are more indicative of most Korean Americans and the experience out there than I think we realize. And everyone has this sense of authenticity and insecurity about if we're enough. And it's really made me realize, everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Has your friendship gotten a little bit stronger over doing the show?
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I mean, with all friends, especially when one of them moves out to the suburbs, you see each other, you email, you keep in touch here and there. But now Catherine and I really have to stay in touch. And, the discussions and the production meetings we have about our guests often turn into reflections about us and what's going on in our lives and our childhood and how we remember. It brings up so much stuff, and it's absolutely made our friendship deeper and stronger.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that.
But I can see how doing a podcast with a friend is dicey. It could easily go wrong. But fortunately, with Juliana, I always know she's working her ass off. Like, I don't feel like she's ever slacking. I could see that between partners, somebody feels slightly resentful about one thing or another. But normally I'm just like, thank God Juliana knows how to do this. Thank God Juliana can make this image great, or can, I don't have to worry. I mean, I just feel glad to be part of it because she's such a good partner.
Oh, I'm so glad the two of you are partnered up.
No, it's true. It's true. So yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you two are doing this show. It's really so good. You are onto something now. So I'm assuming you're almost at the wrap of your second season. Are you about to start the third?
Well, we are on our third.
You are on the third.
Each season is 10 episodes. So we're on the third episode of season 3. And we've got 7 more guests to go before it's over.
Are you going to make any shifts in the show in the future?
One thing we've done, and I think we're going to do at least one more time, is if there's a guest who we had a guest, Jim Lee, who is a very renowned comic book artist, but Juliana and I are not especially aficionados of comic books, but our audio engineer was. So we had him on as like a guest host, as a super fan. So that was a kind of a fun twist. And there's another episode where we're thinking about interviewing a musician who there's another woman on our team who's a huge fan of. So we thought it would be nice to have, another guest host. There are little things like that we thought we could do.
I like that, a super fan show. I think that's
just getting another guest host on who can ask different sorts of questions, And
I'm sure people do this too, but we've been thinking of using our stories and a little survey function to say, hey, we're interviewing Michelle Zahner tomorrow. Anybody have any questions for our guests? So it would be like a listener question that we could throw out there. So those are things to also bring engagement that we've been thinking about.
Nice.
And the other thing we've been advised to do by many people, and Juliana and I were reluctant, but we're doing more of, is putting more of ourselves into the episodes. Because we're both kind of shy people and we're both used to being behind the scenes. So we at first went into the podcast thinking we're just going to ask the questions and have the guests answer them. But she and I also know that our favorite podcasts are the ones where the hosts and their personalities and the dynamics. And So we have been advised to give a little more of ourselves, which doesn't come naturally to us, but we're doing a little bit more of that.
I think that's really good
Hopefully
advice. And I do hear you doing that. And as your episodes go on, I hear that in your more recent episodes. So you're definitely doing that. And, keep doing that, because that's the attraction to that binge listener. They are tuning in because they could trust you too, to bring them a great story, to bring them yourself, to bring yourself into it and ask the questions they wish they could if they were sitting in your seat. So keep that up. Catherine and Juliana, I'm just amazed by how far you've come in 23 episodes, because it's really come far for you, and you should be so proud of what you do. But I bet there are a lot of people out there who are going, wow, you're a podcast host. Like, that's great. I'm not sure. I've always thought about doing it. So what advice do you have to someone who's sitting back thinking, maybe I should do a show?
Hire AJ. You need an excellent audio engineer.
Hire well.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just asked me this yesterday, and she had an amazing idea for a show. She even had a pretty famous person who told her she wanted to produce it for her, but that person wasn't a podcast expert. And so this friend called me, and I said, it's actually pretty easy now. I mean, as you know, Tracy, you don't really need much of any high-tech anything. You could just start interviewing people, talking to them on the phone, recording it. It's so easy to get started. So my advice would be to just start it. It's so simple. I mean,
you
right,
can get
Juliana?
better production value as you go, right?
Yeah, but to just jump in, it wasn't that complicated.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much. K-Pod, a fabulous podcast you're all going to want to check out there. I'll make sure that you can link through to Catherine Hong and Juliana Sohn, and you can connect up with K-Pod and the Korean American Story at thebingefactor.com. Make sure you have all the links for everything right there in the episode notes for this podcast.
Thank you so much.
I told you this was going to be a different kind of episode, right? And the dynamic between the two of them and the way they are balancing each other out, between Catherine Hong and Juliana Sohn, they're just like bringing together some beautiful creativity, both in the writing side of things and the visual side of things, which we are highly underrated in this audio media that we've got going on in podcasting. But they're bringing all those pieces together, which I've found as a recipe for success again and again and again throughout everything that I've seen in podcasting. So, remember that when I'm looking for a show or looking at a show for the very first time and reviewing it, one of the first things I do is look at the visuals. So I type in trying to search for them, right? Because you got to find them. And then I look at their impact cover art. How is that affecting me? Am I really looking at their icon and going, I want to click on that show. I want to hear what that's about. It's intriguing. Then I'm going to read what's written in the description. And while that can always be changed and improved at any time, so feel free to take some of the advice that are going on here in the show from all the different episodes, but go ahead and improve that, because that writing matters, because some of us are not only auditory, but we're also visual. Where we need all the senses to be working together to really make our shows bingeable, to make people want to share them with others, because we don't know if other people are, podcasters. So until someone says, oh, I love podcasts, what new podcasts are you listening to? Do I go out there and recommend it? Well, I do when I know there's a show that has all the pieces, because then it won't matter if they're video people, if they're writers and they want to read something, or readers and they want to read good writing, like all of those pieces come together in this show. And I especially love the dynamic episode art that they're creating, the art where they're creating the graphic of the guest and the topic, and that's in their blog at Korean American Story. So you really want to check that out. So remember, all the links for this podcast and for everything that's mentioned in the show will always be in the blog post for this episode at thebingefactor.com. That's the only thing you have to remember. You just click on the one that's about Juliana Sohn, Catherine Hong, and K-Pod, because you're not going to want to miss what they do. And it doesn't matter if you're a part of that Korean American community. It's a great insight and really how to create a great show where you create this rapport with your audience and a shared experience, a shared identity. You can do that too, because so many of you are creating mission-based and or community-based podcasts, and they've got this down. And you can follow this model, even if the Korean American community isn't your target, isn't your audience. You can create that kind of model as well. So I'm looking forward to interviewing you as you all bring your shows out into the marketplace here on the Binge Factor as you grow that bingeable show. And I look forward to my next experience where I can learn something new, just like I did today with the K-Pod podcast. And I look forward to that every single week when I bring you these episodes on the Binge Factor.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.